Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon.
I am 67 years old, and until that night, I still believed I had raised a decent daughter. Not perfect, not ungrateful, just decent. The kind of person who, even if she disagreed with me, wouldn't slice my dignity open in public. But that illusion died over white linen and red wine, drowned beneath chandeliers and polished silverware. It was a Sunday evening, early September. That moment between seasons when the summer warmth still lingers in the bones of the day, but the air sharpens by evening. The restaurant was perched on the marina, 3 stories of glass and stone that overlooked the water like a lighthouse for people who didn't need saving. Inside, everything glowed. Soft amber light spilled from glass, orbs hanging overhead like delicate moons. The tables were dressed in pressed ivory cloths, candles flickering low in heavy crystal holders. Waiters moved like shadows, silent, poised, crisp white shirts under black waistcoats, each carrying trays balanced like rituals. The scent of seared salmon, lemon butter, and rosemary floated faintly in the air, mixing with the citrus in the hand soap from the restrooms. Every detail was curated for comfort, for charm, for the illusion that nothing painful could ever happen here. Everyone was already seated by the time I arrived. My daughter Melissa waved me over to the long table by the window. Outside, the skyline flickered like a scattered jewel box. Boats moved slowly across the harbor, their lights painting silver ripples in the water. I took the seat she had saved. Beside her, I smiled. I always smiled first. Melissa looked radiant. She'd always had that ability to look put together, not polished like Christy, but elegant in a way that felt accidental. She wore a pale green wrap dress, the kind that caught the light at the folds. Her hair was pinned up with little gold clips that sparkled every time she turned. She didn't kiss my cheek when I sat down, just tapped the menu and asked if I'd already eaten that day. I told her no and added that I'd brought Brandon a card. She didn't respond, just turned her attention to the wine list. I quietly slid the envelope under his water glass. Across from me sat James, my ex-husband. Age had caught up to him gently, a little grayer, a little thicker around the middle, but still smug in the way men become when they've never known the word consequence. Beside him was Christy, the moo wife, 10 years younger, sleek bob, eyes like polished glass. She wore red, not burgundy, not wine red, and she laughed with her whole mouth, even when nothing was funny. To her credit, Christy tried to be charming. She made a comment about how I must be Brandon's grandmother, and when I replied that I was indeed his mother's mother, her face tightened for a breath before smoothing out like fresh icing. Melissa laughed too loudly at something James said about vacationing in wine country. The waiter poured sparkling water into tall glasses. Ice clinked softly, a delicate civil sound. I tried to keep the conversation going, asked about Brandon's summer trip, his college search, his new guitar teacher. I asked Melissa about her work, her husband's new position, if she'd finally gotten that patio fixed like she'd planned last spring. She answered in fragments, smiles that didn't reach her eyes, always trailing back to her father or Christy, as though something about me bored her now. I picked at the warm bread on the table, twisting the corner of the napkin in my lap. My back was straight, my voice measured. Inside, though, I felt it, a slow tightening behind my ribs, a familiar sense that I was the afterthought again. And then it happened. We were talking about books, or I was trying to. I had mentioned one she loved as a child, the one with the bear and the red scarf. Bruno's Winter, I think it was called. I thought she'd smile, maybe laugh, maybe remember the nights I read it to her when her father was still at work, when she'd curl up against me and ask me to read it again, even when she could already read on her own. But instead she blinked, stared at her wine, and let out this breathy laugh. "Oh my God, Mom, you're so outdated," she said. "Seriously, you're like stuck in the 90s. I froze, not in shock, but in calculation. I waited for her to laugh it off, to say she was joking. But she didn't. She leaned back in her chair, brushed a strand of hair from her temple, and looked at Christy. Then she said louder, more certain now, "You're a loser. Dad's new wife is incredible." The table went silent. Even the waiter, who had been approaching with a tray of salmon and roast duck, stopped mid-step. Someone at the next table turned slightly. The candle flickered between us. It felt like the air had thickened, like I had to push it away just to breathe. My spine locked. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like something unhooked. But my face didn't move, not a single muscle. I looked at her, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with a stillness I didn't know I had. James cleared his throat, but said nothing. Christy pretended to adjust her napkin. Brandon sipped his drink. No one, not one person, said a word in my defense. I sat back. I set down my fork. I looked out the window for a moment, watching a boat slip behind the pier like a secret. I felt the cloth of the chair beneath my palms. I heard the quiet clink of a spoon on porcelain from another table. My throat burned, not from tears, but from the effort of not letting them come. My silence became my shield. I stayed through the main course. I even nodded, politely when someone offered me a bite of risotto, but inside I was already gone. I counted every minute until I could leave without causing a scene. When the waiter returned with dessert menus, I excused myself, saying I had an early morning. No one argued. Melissa didn't even look up. I paid for my own meal at the front. The hostess blinked at me, surprised, but took the card without comment. I stepped outside. The night had cooled. The wind smelled of salt and diesel. Across the bay, the skyline shimmered with lights that meant nothing to me. I walked slowly toward the edge of the pier and stood there, arms crossed, watching the water move. What hurt wasn't the insult. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the silence of people I had once believed would speak for me. The realization that I had spent decades sewing a life for others only to be told it was out of fashion. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. The house was quiet, but my head was loud. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, where faint shadows from the tree outside danced on the white paint. They moved slowly, like ghostly fingers tracing old stories. My room smelled faintly of lavender from the satch in my dresser, but even that couldn't soothe me. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on my chest. I kept hearing it in my head, like a needle stuck in a groove. "You're a loser. Dad's new wife is incredible." The words cut deeper each time I remembered them, not because they were true, but because they came from her. My daughter, my only child. I turned onto my side, then my back, then my other side. The sheets were tangled and the pillow was damp where my hand had rested. I sat up, kicked off the covers, and went to the window. Outside, the sky was a heavy blue just before dawn. The street lamp cast a dull glow over the driveway. Everything looked the same, and nothing felt the same. I walked barefoot into the kitchen. The tile was cold against my feet. The clock on the microwave blinked 4:12 a.m. I put on the kettle, out of habit, but when it began to whistle, I turned it off. I didn't want to. I just didn't want to sit in silence. I sat at the table and stared at my hands. The same hands that had held her as a baby brushed her hair, buttoned her school shirts, tied her shoes, wiped her tears, held her through breakups, packed her lunches, even in college when she came home on weekends. I had done everything I knew how to do, and somehow it wasn't enough. Or maybe it was never appreciated to begin with. That night, after the dinner, I had said nothing. Not to her, not to anyone. But inside, something shifted. Something snapped. It wasn't just about what she said. It was what came before it and what came after it. The years, the choices, the silence. Melissa hadn't humiliated me by accident. It was easy for her, natural. That hurt more than anything. I started remembering moments I had buried, thinking they didn't matter, but they did. Like when she needed money for college and I emptied. My savings, every cent. She said thanks over the phone like she was reading it off a script. A week later, she posted photos from Cancun. Not a word to me. Or when she lost her job after the divorce and moved back in. She stayed in the guest room, left takeout containers on the coffee table, came and went like a guest. I tried to talk to her. She'd say, "Don't start, Mom," and walk away. I was her mother again only when she needed something. I remembered her first car, a silver sedan. She couldn't afford it, so I co-signed, made the first 5 payments while she got back on her feet. She never offered to pay me back. When I once mentioned it, she snapped. "Why do you always keep score?" I didn't. I just remembered. There's a difference. Even when she had her first apartment, I helped her move. I cleaned the bathroom, bought her towels and groceries. She posted a picture of her independence that night. I wasn't in the photo. I wasn't mentioned. And now, after all that, she had looked me in the eye in front of everyone and said I was a loser. I walked into the living room, turned on a small lamp. The warm light hit the old bookshelf. The family pictures, most of them included her, Melissa at 5 in her Halloween costume, Melissa at 12 holding a science fair ribbon, Melissa at 17 in her prom dress, me beside her, and everyone smiling proud. I picked up one of the frames. My hand trembled. Where did she go? The girl in the photos. The one who used to run into my arms, who used to call me her best friend. When did I become the person she was embarrassed by? The hallway clock struck 5. The soft chime echoed. I sat back down, this time on the couch. The cushion sagged slightly under my weight, worn in from years of use. The room was still. The hum of the fridge in the kitchen was the only sound. She hadn't just insulted me. She erased me publicly, and no one said a word. James just sat there, his face unreadable. Christy smiled politely like none of it concerned her. Melissa's husband stared at his plate. Brandon scrolled on his phone. I was alone at that table, surrounded by people. The truth is, I'd been alone for years. I just hadn't seen it clearly until now. The world outside started to brighten. A soft pink glow crept over the houses across the street. I stood and opened the back door. The cool air brushed against my skin. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance. It should have felt peaceful, but all I felt was tired. Tired of being the one who showed up. Tired of being the one who gave. Tired of being the one who was always too sensitive when I got hurt. I went upstairs and pulled out a photo album from the closet. I flipped through it slowly. My hands moved carefully over the pages, as if touching those images could bring something back. There was a picture of us at the zoo. She was on my shoulders laughing, her small hands tangled in my hair. Another of her in her cap and gown, me hugging her so tight her face was half hidden. Another of a Thanksgiving dinner, where she sat across from me, holding up a pie she had baked. I had taught her that recipe. She doesn't remember, but I do. Each memory, once warm, now had an edge, a coldness underneath. Not because they weren't real, but because they were real. And now they were buried under everything she had done since. I closed the album. She had rewritten me in her life, turned me from the mother who gave everything into some outdated figure of pity. But I remembered every sacrifice, every late night, every fear I swallowed so she wouldn't have to. And now I was the one, swallowing my pride again, but for the last time. I stood by the window. The sun was fully up now. The street was quiet, but light spilled across the pavement like a fresh start. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something worse. I was clear. I finally saw it for what it was. All these years I thought I was giving her a foundation. She thought it was a stage, and I was never meant to share the spotlight. She had pushed me off at the moment I wasn't useful anymore. But I wasn't gone, and I wasn't finished. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her validation. I needed my place back in my own life, not as her background, not as her servant, not as her scapegoat, as myself. And I would get it back quietly, decisively. Soon. 3 mornings passed before I made the decision, not out of impulse, not out of rage, but out of something calmer and far more dangerous. Clarity. The third morning was the quietest of them all. The neighborhood was still wrapped in a soft mist, the kind that clung gently to tree branches and made the street lights look like floating halos. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in my robe, a ceramic mug warm between my pawns. The coffee smelled faintly of hazelnut, my favorite blend. I didn't add sugar. The bitterness suited me. The house around me creaked with age. The floorboards spoke in soft groans, and the fridge let out a tired hum now and then. Outside, the world was slowly waking up. Birds called faintly from the hedges. A dog barked 2 streets over. The scent of dew and damp earth drifted through the open window, mingling with the silence. Melissa's voice echoed again in my mind. That same sentence, like a cut that never stopped stinging. You're a loser. Dad's new wife is incredible. I closed my eyes. My jaw tensed. She had said it like it was obvious, like it was a fact I should have accepted long ago. What she didn't know, what she had never bothered to notice, was that every dollar she'd saved, every account she claimed was rooted in something I had, quietly built. Long ago I opened those accounts. As joint holder, I paid the fees, did the paperwork, updated the passwords. She never read the fine print. She never thought she had to. I stood, walked slowly to the hallway, and opened the closet where I kept my old filing cabinet. It was tucked behind a dusty vacuum and a rolled-up rug I'd been meaning to donate. I pulled the top drawer open and ran my fingers across the tabs. Melissa Counts. The folder was thick. Bank agreements, statements, correspondence. My name is in bold on every page, and only my name as the sole owner. I took it all to the dining table, spread it out beneath the chandelier's soft morning glow. The crystals caught the light and cast little patterns on the paperwork. I studied each page carefully. Every detail felt like a thread I was pulling free from a tangled knot. She thought I had nothing left to give, but she forgot one thing. I'd never stopped keeping the house in order. Not even after the divorce. Not even after being forgotten. By noon, I had an appointment with the bank. The branch was nestled between a florist and a tailor in an older part of town where ivy climbed the brick walls and the sidewalks smelled faintly of warm cement and fresh cut grass. The air was warm and heavy, summer trying to outstay its welcome. Inside, the bank was cool and still, lit by overhead panels that buzzed quietly. The banker assigned to me was young, maybe 30. She wore a pale blue blouse and smiled politely, though her eyes held the detached focus of someone trained not to. Pry. I handed her my identification, the folder, the request. Yes, ma'am, she said after a moment. As the account holder, you have every right to freeze or transfer funds. She clicked through her computer, asking a few verification questions. I answered each with a calm voice, even though my pulse fluttered quietly in my throat. Not from nerves, from the gravity of the moment. When she slid the final form across the desk, I held the pen for just a second longer than needed. Then I signed. It was done. Outside, a light rain had started. I stood under the awning for a moment, watching it soften the edges of the world. It made the sidewalk shimmer. The maple trees across the road swayed gently, their leaves just beginning to turn. The breeze smelt like rain on warm pavement and something faintly floral from the nearby shop. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt clean at home. I put the documents away and made myself lunch. A simple sandwich, half a peach. I turned on the radio. A soft jazz melody floated through the kitchen, brushing the air with comfort. And then I lit a candle. I sat in the living room with the candle flickering near a photo of Melissa, age 9. Her arms were around my neck in the picture, her cheeks round with childhood. I stared at it for a long time. Where had she gone? She used to sit on the kitchen floor and talk to me for hours. She used to ask for bedtime stories, even after she could read. She used to leave sticky notes on the fridge. Love you, Mom. The twist came. 2 days later, a letter arrived. It was from, and my sister. The handwriting on the envelope was instantly familiar, slanted, neat, full of intention. We hadn't spoken deeply in years, not because of a fight, but because of life drifting. Inside, her words stunned me. She had heard about the dinner. Our cousin had told her. She wrote, "I remember when Dad told you to be quiet at dinner, that you were the plain one, that you should just be useful. I never forgot that night, but I think you did. You turned that shame into love. You raised a daughter who forgot, but you never stopped giving." My eyes burned. I set the letter down on the table and folded my hands tightly in my lap. She was right. It wasn't just about Melissa. It was about a lifetime of being taught to make myself small, to be the one who stepped aside to give until there was nothing left to give. But I had finally drawn a line. Not with a fight, with a signature. Melissa hadn't called yet. She wouldn't notice right away. That's how far removed she was. But when she did, when the notifications came, when the card declined, when the numbers didn't add up, she would. And she'd panic. She'd lull, and I would answer. Not to gloat, not to explain, but to make something clear. It was never about the money. It was about respect. And after decades of giving it away, I had finally chosen to give it to myself. The phone started ringing at 7:16 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I had just sat down at the kitchen table with my first cup of tea. Steam curled slowly from the mug, dancing upward in the golden light that spilled in through the window blinds. Outside, the air was tinted a soft orange, the sky clear but not yet blue. Birds chirped nearby, and somewhere down the street, a sprinkler clicked rhythmically against dry grass. It was Melissa. I didn't answer. She called again 2 minutes later, then again at 7:22, and again at 7:26. The fourth time I picked up, "Mom, my cards aren't working." She shouted before. I could even say hello. Her voice was loud, strained, brittle like glass about to shatter. "The bank says they're frozen." "What's going on? Did something happen? Did you hear anything?" Her tone wasn't one of confusion. It was panic. Immediate, unfiltered panic, like a person who'd been handed a reality they never imagined. I took a calm sip of tea, let the warmth rest on my tongue, then swallowed slowly. "You called me a loser," I said, my voice even quiet. "Now you know who actually held control." There was silence on the line, not even a breath. I could almost hear her mind stalling, trying to fill in the gaps, trying to pull up every memory, every signature she never paid attention to. "You can't be serious," she finally said. Her voice was lower now, shaky. Not angry yet, just stunned. "That money is mine." "Legally," I replied, "it never was. You have no right." I didn't bother answering that. I simply ended the call. The air in the kitchen felt lighter. I leaned back in the chair and looked out the window. The neighbor's cat was curled up on their porch step, sunbathing lazily. A slight breeze rattled the leaves in the maple tree, and the smell of damp soil wafted in through the screen. That was the beginning of the unraveling. By noon, she had called 6 more times. No voicemails, just missed calls, lined up like dominoes on my screen. She followed up with a series of texts, frantic, then furious, then strangely formal. "What are you doing? You can't do this. I needed that for bills. Rent is due. You don't understand what this is causing." And finally, please. Each one sat on my screen, glowing like little sparks. I didn't answer. By evening, James sent a message. "What did you do?" No greeting, no emotion, just a challenge. His name, lighting up my phone, felt like an echo from a version of myself I no longer recognized. The next morning, I opened my email and saw a message from Christy. It was longer, measured, almost polite. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. These things can become messy quickly. Melissa is very upset. For everyone's sake, perhaps we can discuss this calmly and restore harmony." Restore harmony. The phrase sat like a rock in my stomach. Where was harmony when Melissa looked me in the eye and called me worthless in front of a room of people? Where was calm when I was left in silence, surrounded by people who should have spoken up for me? Melissa's husband called next. He left a voicemail, then another. "This is getting serious," he said in the third one. "We have bills, payments. We need access to those funds. She says you froze everything. We don't understand why you would do this." His tone was polite at first, but there was frustration beneath it. Tension, then panic. "We were supposed to fly out next week. All of it is booked. Flights, of course. They had planned a trip. Greece, if I remembered right. Melissa mentioned it offhandedly weeks ago. Oh, we just needed a break." That break was now cancelled. And for the first time I didn't feel like the one holding the broken pieces. I felt peace because I remembered. I remembered how she laughed at Christie's jokes that night, smiling too wide, too eager. I remembered how she looked at me like I was a relic, something to be dusted off and hidden. I remembered the way her tone changed when she was around her father, that subtle sharp edge that came out only when I was in the room. And I remembered every moment after when no one, not one person, came to my defense. So no, I felt no guilt, no need to explain, no desire to comfort. That day I baked a small tray of lemon bars. The scent of citrus and butter filled the house, and I opened the kitchen window to let the breeze in. The sky outside had cleared completely, a pale blue stretching overhead. The wind danced with the curtains, and the radio played an old jazz standard that made the moment feel timeless. Melissa came to the house 2 days later. I saw her car pull up from my spot on the living room couch. She stepped out quickly, clearly flustered. She wore a long beige coat and sunglasses, though it was cloudy that morning. Her heels clicked sharply against the walkway. She stood at the door but didn't knock. Just stood there, arms crossed, staring. Her jaw was set, her whole posture tight. For a moment, I wondered if she would break down, if she'd knock or cry or say something. But she turned and left. She reminded me so much of James in that moment. That same quiet entitlement, the belief that the world owed her wrath, that any closed door was an insult. I watched her drive off, then returned to my tea. That evening, the sunset was a blend of soft pink and gold, glowing across the tops of the trees. I took my tea out to the porch, wrapped in a shawl, and watched the neighborhood settle into twilight. The children down the street rode their bikes, one last time before dinner. A neighbor walked his dog past my fence and waved. I waved back. The silence I kept wasn't cold. It was mine. They kept trying to paint me as angry, as emotional, as out of control. But the truth was I was calm, grounded, clear. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't revenge. This was balance. I had spent decades giving more than I received, filling silence with generosity, swallowing pain for the sake of peace, smiling through disrespect and calling it love. Now I was just returning the silence. Melissa sent me a long message on the 4th day. "I know you're hurt, but this is going too far. Family doesn't punish each other like this. We love each other, even when we make mistakes." I stared at the message for a long time. Family. That word so easily thrown around when it suited her. But where was that family when I sat at that restaurant table humiliated? Where was that love when she rolled her eyes at me every time I spoke? Where was that understanding when I gave and gave and gave and was still considered not enough? I didn't reply. Sometimes the only answer left is silence. I had watched her disrespect me for years. And now I had stopped watching, stopped waiting, stopped explaining. Let her feel the quiet, let her wonder. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than apology. And for once in my life, I wanted to hear my own voice again, even if no one else could, even if it only said one thing enough. It started with a message from someone I didn't expect. Not Melissa, not James, not even Christy. It was a young woman named Lacey. someone I barely remembered from Melissa's university years. She had been Melissa's roommate during her sophomore semester. Quiet, soft-spoken. I had only met her once, briefly, when I dropped off groceries during finals week. Her message was short, typed late at night. I know we haven't spoken in years, but I just wanted to say thank you. I never told you how much it meant when you brought me soup that winter I was sick. You didn't know, but I had no family nearby. I still remember how kind you were. You made me feel like I mattered. I read that message 3 times. It was a whisper from the past, a moment I barely remembered that had clearly mattered to someone else more than I ever realized. A small act, unnoticed by my own daughter, had become someone else's memory of warmth. I didn't cry, but I felt something settle in me, like a loose puzzle piece clicking into place. A reminder that just because someone close to you refuses to see you doesn't mean you're invisible. But the family didn't let up. Melissa started posting online, subtle at first, vague quotes about loyalty and being betrayed by those who should protect you. Photos of her looking away from the camera, eyes shaded, captions like, "Sometimes we grow beyond those who raised us." I didn't comment. I didn't respond. A few mutual friends reached out. One asked if I was okay. Another gently mentioned how things seem tense right now, and maybe it would help if you just apologized, even if you didn't mean it. That last message made something cold slide down my spine, because that's how it had always been. Me apologizing, even when I was the one holding the pieces together, even when I was the one cleaning up their messes, even when I was the one quietly bleeding so no one else had to get their hands dirty. Not anymore. Then the doorbell started ringing. Melissa came once more, stood on the porch for 10 minutes, and knocked loudly. I didn't move from the couch. I didn't peek through the curtains. She texted me from the steps. "I know you're home. This is cruel. This is manipulation." I didn't reply. 2 days later, James showed up. His car, still the same old BMW, pulled into the driveway like he had a right to be there. He didn't get out, just sat behind the wheel for several minutes. Then he reversed and left. It didn't matter. They were circling because they felt the shift. Because for the first time in their lives, I wasn't holding the door open. I was holding it shut, not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because I had finally realized that silence wasn't weakness. It was space, and I had filled that space with myself. I returned to my routines. I bought fresh flowers every Sunday just for me. I cooked proper meals, not just toast or leftovers. I listened to the kind of music I used to love when I was younger, before motherhood consumed every second of the day. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since Melissa was in high school. The house smelled like citrus and linen. The light shifted with the seasons. I opened the windows more often. My world became smaller but richer. The letters from the bank came. Weekly now. Confirmations, updates, quiet reminders of what I had taken back into my own hands. Melissa sent a birthday card. It came late. The handwriting was rushed. The message short. "Hope you're well." I placed it in a drawer, not out of malice. I just didn't want it on the mantel. She hadn't called since. Sometimes I wondered if she was hoping I would reach out, that I would cave, that I would ask to meet or send money or say the words she needed to feel righteous again. But I didn't. I had said all I needed to without speaking at all. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of every boundary I never set, full of the worth I had finally started assigning to myself. In that stillness, I remembered who I was before I was only someone's mother, before I was Melissa's unpaid assistant, before I was her cushion, before I was her silence. One afternoon, I casted by a neighbor's yard sale. On a folding table sat a collection of old photo frames. One of them had a quote in cursive, slightly faded. "You don't have to be loud to be heard." I bought it. It sits by my front door now, not as a message to others, but as a reminder to myself. Some evenings I sit on the porch and think about all the versions of me that I let go. The one who said yes to everything. The one who swallowed her feelings. The one who was too afraid to be seen as difficult. The one who kept giving to people who took without looking back. I mourned her. Then I let her go. In her place stands someone, quieter, older, and finally whole. Someone who no longer needs permission to protect her peace. Someone who knows that choosing herself isn't betrayal. It's survival. If Melissa ever truly wants to see me again, she'll have to meet the version of me she tried so hard to overlook. Not the helper, not the silent one, but the woman who remembered her own name. And if that moment never comes, I will still be here alone, yes, but free with warmth inside me and no more apologies left to give. Because I realized age is not about weakness. It's about dignity. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. And I won't be afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts.
Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Thanks for watching.